Hello. In this tutorial, we are both going to explore the profile of an archetype called the defeatist. The defeatist is a part of the self that sees a dark cloud within every silver lining, and it has the superpower of cynicism. That's because this part of the self will question and doubt that things will happen, where there is a fatalistic outlook on life. The defeatist's motto is, you just don't know how bad I've got it. That's because this part of self is always looking at the downside, on the dim side of life, and therefore failure is the name of its game. The defeatist archetype is the part of us that does expect failure, or is ready to accept failure at the first sign of difficulty. So whenever the chips are down, when you've lost willpower, lost heart, feel demoralized, when your desires aren't forthcoming, when you think that the progress is hard, when you doubt that things will turn out right, or when you've conceded to failure, that's when the defeatist mentality has arrived. The defeatist is a trait that focuses on the downside of the situation, thinking about how laborious, relentless, unrewarding and unachievable that aspect of your life is, finding every reasonable excuse to quit. So let's now discuss the three different types of defeatism. We have avoidance, fatigue, and actual defeat. Let's start with avoidance defeat. The defeatist is that part of you with self-limiting beliefs and a poor attitude that you're doomed to failure before you even try to make something work. The complete opposite of an optimistic outlook, the defeatist has pessimistic thinking with the tendency to see the worst aspect of things and believe that the worst will happen. That's because the defeatist is keen to avoid that which is hard, uncomfortable, unknown and uncertain, because there is a fear of harm, loss and failure. The defeatist in you will cast doubts that this will never work, or I don't have the insert the blank, or it's just too hard because of. Thus, this part of you is defeated before even starting out on something. And if you have no prior knowledge of what an experience will be like, then you're drawing unverified conclusions. You're making false premonitions that will soon become self-fulfilling prophecies when you don't start something, or you do start something but you never see it through to the end. Because in reality, we never truly know anything until we get into it. We never truly learn and get better at anything until we do it. There is, however, a beneficial asset to avoiding things. There are times that we do need to avoid potential harms, losses and failures. Where it is appropriate and necessary, it is sometimes best to concede that things won't work, especially when the risk of trying to achieve something outweighs the potential reward. And this comes down to investigation and discernment, the ability to accurately assess when something needs tackling or avoiding altogether. Now, the detrimental impact of avoidance defeat is this. Unfortunately, we can unnecessarily and mistakenly tend to avoid things more often than not and concede that we can't do what is necessary to succeed, when actually, with enough grit, savvy and determination and the right strategy, we can succeed. It is usually at the first indication that there will be some type of strain, some type of unwanted exposure, where we feel uncertain and vulnerable, which is almost always when we face similar situations that we have experienced a similar type of loss or failure in the past. Things that we avoid will always be a chink in the armor, this weakness and regret that we can't be or do better, or that we can't find retribution, redemption, and success in a certain area of our life. Moving on. The most common type of defeat is fatigued defeat. The defeatist is a trait that surrenders to and retreats back from situations that place a taxing demand on one's personal capacity. When feeling psychologically and physically tired, drained and demoralized by the something, somehow or someone, the defeatist will lose faith and choose to throw the towel in and abandon the situation altogether. Of course, there are times that we do need to stop banging the head against the brick wall and realize that our efforts are wasted and then admit defeat, especially with activities and situations that don't make progress, and when dealing with people who can't respond in a manner that's conducive to our needs. When we do experience persistent frustration, stress and upset without any visible upside or evidence that things will improve, then it's time to call it a day and move on, because nothing but suffering comes from chasing a lost cause. We therefore need good judgment to choose our fights wisely, knowing for absolute certain if the battle is winnable before we start. Once we have started, it is also to know when the battle is lost and not worth any more time and effort. Making decisions when we are fatigued will typically lead to a poor result. When feeling fatigued, we are at our lowest and weakest ebb. When feeling down, we are most likely to conclude, and with a host of reasons and excuses, why things aren't working out. And really, we're just in a poor frame of mind that is looking at a situation from a downgraded point of view. Sometimes we just need time out from a situation to adequately rest, recuperate, and reflect. In most cases, when temporarily removing ourselves from a tough situation, we are lent the perspective to review where we are perhaps taking the wrong or inefficient approach. Within a neutral space, we can devise a new strategy, ready to restart the progress with renewed determination. With a proven strategy, enough time and persistence, most games in life are winnable. Sometimes a step back is what we need to prepare for a resurgent comeback. Sometimes all it takes is just one new thought, one new idea, one more push that leads to ultimate victory. And this leads us to the topic of actual defeat. The defeatist is an archetypal trait that has developed as a result of experiencing some type of failure in the past that has resulted in a subtle to severe life-altering trauma. It could have been a failed business, failed relationship, failed career, activity or venture. But what we need to realize is that failure is a fact of life. The pathway to success is littered with multiple failures. In everything that we try for the first time, we will almost always fail at it. Sometimes we must fail at the one thing and fail at it multiple times until we succeed at it. Therefore, actual failure should be embraced as a necessary requirement to become skillful at something. We need to accept that we will get it wrong, make mistakes, be seen as incompetent when starting out on new ventures, counting each minor failure as a stepping stone towards the final result that we desire. gaining wisdom from each step so that we become more refined and resilient. There is, however, a detrimental impact where the defeatist archetype is likely to respond to actual failure with outward blame, blaming the person, the circumstance, the conditions, or the resources, etc., for being wrong. In which case, one never takes responsibility for their choices, nor realizes how what they did or did not do had resulted in the failure. Until we take ownership of the failures in our life, we can't learn the wisdom and grow from them. The defeatist mindset will always compare present reality situations from a lens of past experiences that resulted in a similar type of pain and loss, and then make worst case scenario predictions. For example, you could have experienced an abusive relationship, and now whenever thinking of new relationships, you might frame the mere idea of being intimate with someone with fears of getting hurt and fears of loss, which prevents you from seeking new relationships. Those actual failures from the past become perceived failures in the present, which makes us think and feel pessimistic towards similar situations in the future. So let's wrap this up with a summary about the defeatist archetype. The defeatist archetype will always be a strong presence when the circumstances of our life do not align with our deepest feelings, highest purpose, and a worthwhile cause, which means we could be doubtful and reluctant towards something, which in this case, having a defeatist outlook is a healthy signal that change is needed. For when the heart is not committed to the outcome, we are out of alignment with true nature, and we will always feel stressed and discontent with that which does not align with true nature. Whereas that which aligns with true nature is feeding the heart, and the heart would never quit. Even when we think of quitting, the heart just won't buy it. However, with little consideration for the upside, the defeatist will always think of how the situation today will probably turn out disastrous like yesterday. Then, this part of self will affirm those negative viewpoints by seeking counsel from cynical people or digesting information that reinforces those negative beliefs. Every which way but win. The defeatist is a part of you that's thinking of how pointless, meaningless, undoable, and hopeless things are. The defeatist is hypercritical and doubtful as to whether things will unfold as you desire. When cultivating a new area of our life or pushing through to the next level, the defeatist voice will always be there to warn and deter us from taking action. In that desired outcome that we know will be a huge benefit to our life, then we need to learn to live with that inner voice, that little bitch that doubts whether we can make it, and then continue regardless. The defeatist archetype is the king of self-sabotage. When we agree with the defeatist's negative and nihilistic thinking, we start to give resentment and resignation towards the object of our perceived suffering. We can then start to imagine a host of unverified reasons that justify why we must quit. When the struggle to persist has reached a boiling point, entree the escape artist, which will be the part of us that will hatch the escape plan away from the bleak situation that we refuse to continue with. The ultimate problem with the defeatist mindset is that the defeatist does not realize that by quitting, we can never win. The defeatist quits without starting, quits at the first hurdle, quits when the going gets tough, quits without a good fight, and quits way too soon. Unfortunately, the defeatist cannot see that some situations are temporary and conquerable. The defeatist does not realise that each time we quit, we must endure the pangs of failure and the efforts of starting all over again. Now consider how the defeatist is having both a positive and negative impact on your life. Where are you giving up in your life before you even start? Where are you throwing in the towel and quitting on your stall without going one more round to see if you can win? Where are you continually banging your head on trying to win over someone or win at something, and yet the result is just not happening? Therefore, you really do need to quit and restart with something new. Now that you are familiar with the defeatist archetype, it's time for you to watch the tutorial for archetypal profile number 6, which is the exhibitionist.